The Zorkai Dominion had conquered 100 worlds. They had enslaved entire species. They had never lost a war. And now they had set their sights on Earth. They thought humanity would be just another easy conquest. They were wrong. Because they didn't understand Deathworlders. Not yet. But they were about to learn. The hard way. The invasion begins. It started like all their conquests. The Zorkai fleet entered the Sol system, their warships casting shadows over Earth's moon. Their leader, High Warlord Kraxven, issued a broadcast to all of humanity. Surrender your world and kneel before the Dominion. Resist and we will burn your cities to ash. They expected fear. They expected submission. They expected humanity to beg for mercy. Instead they got laughter. And a response. A simple, chilling transmission from Earth's military command. Come and try. First contact, and first mistake. The Zorkai fleet descended upon Earth, deploying their elite shock troopers. They expected a quick victory. They got a bloodbath. Their drop ships were shot out of the sky before they landed. Their warriors, clad in heavy exo-armor, were shredded by human ballistic weaponry. Their scouting units reported something impossible. These creatures, they don't retreat. They don't surrender. They enjoy the fight. Because for humans, this wasn't just survival. This was sport. The Deathworlders show their teeth. The first real battle took place in the ruins of New Cairo. The Zorkai legions, towering 8-foot beasts of muscle and armor, faced off against human special forces. The Zorkai charged forward, roaring. The humans? They grinned. Finally, one soldier muttered. A real fight. Then they opened fire. And the Zorkai learned, far too late, what they were dealing with. A lesson in pain. The Dominion's warriors were built for conquest. They were used to enemies breaking, running, surrendering. But humanity? Humanity didn't break. Humanity pushed forward. They moved through fire like it was nothing. They adapted to every tactic within minutes. They fought with a brutality the Zorkai had never seen before. One Zorkai officer, watching in horror, sent a desperate transmission to his command. This species is insane. They fight like they enjoy the pain. Because humans didn't just survive war. They thrived in it. The unthinkable happens. The Zorkai had never lost a planetary assault. But after 5 days of battle, their forces were in full retreat. Their casualties were staggering. Entire divisions had been annihilated. Their best commanders were dead. Their warships, once invincible, had been outmaneuvered and destroyed. And now their leader, High Warlord Kraxven, stood on his flagship, staring at the latest battle reports. His claws trembled, because for the first time in his life, he was afraid. The message from Earth. As the Zorkai fleet prepared to flee, a final message arrived from Earth's high command. It was short, it was simple, and it was terrifying. We were just getting started. The transmission cut out. And in that moment, the Zorkai Dominion learned a lesson they would never forget. You don't poke Deathworlders. Not unless you're ready to burn. The Zorkai fleet fled Earth's atmosphere, their massive warships retreating faster than they had ever moved before. They came to conquer. Now they were running for their lives. Because they had angered the wrong species. They had poked Deathworlders. And now Deathworlders were coming for them. The chase begins. The Zorkai flagship, Wrath of Krax, led the retreat, its hull scarred and burning from unexpected resistance. Inside the bridge, High Warlord Kraxven paced back and forth, his talons clicking against the metal floor. His officers stood frozen, their bodies tense with fear. Status report. Kraxven barked. A navigator stammered. We lost nearly 40% of our fleet. The humans, he swallowed. They're pursuing us. Kraxven's mandibles clicked in confusion. What? No species pursues a retreating fleet. That's suicide. But the humans weren't just pursuing. They were hunting. The first counterattack. As the Zorkai fleet accelerated past the edge of the Sol system, alarms blared across every warship. Incoming human vessels. Impossible, they should be light years behind us. They're already here. And then the Terran fleet struck. It wasn't a direct assault. It was surgical. Precise. Ruthless. Human strike teams infiltrated Zorkai warships, disabling engines before vanishing into the void. Electronic warfare scrambled the Dominion's fleet communications, leaving them blind and disoriented. Every attempt at reformation was met with devastating precision strikes. The Zorkai warriors, once feared across the galaxy, were being systematically dismantled. And they couldn't stop it. Because they weren't fighting an army. They were fighting predators. The psychological warfare begins. By the third day of the retreat, the Zorkai forces were in chaos. Their commanders tried to rally them, but fear had already spread. Because the humans weren't just winning. They were playing with them. Sir, the enemy has stopped attacking. What do you mean stopped? They're waiting for the Zorkai to make a mistake, for their fear to consume them. They could destroy us right now, one officer whispered. Why aren't they? Kraxven knew the answer. It was the same reason a hunter lets its prey run. Because it's more fun to chase. The broadcast that broke them. As the Zorkai forces tried to regroup, a message was transmitted across every Dominion warship. A human stood on the screen. Not a commander. Not a general. Not even a politician. Just a soldier. A man in battle-worn armor, grinning like he had already won. He leaned forward, staring into the camera. And then he spoke. Running already? Damn. We were hoping for a real fight. The entire Zorkai fleet went silent. And the human kept talking. See, we don't like bullies. We don't like slavers. And we really don't like people who think they can walk into our home and take what's ours. His smile faded. You're not the hunters anymore. You're not the predators. You're prey. The screen cut to black. And the Zorkai commanders felt something they had never felt before. Pure terror. The final desperate stand. With no choice left, Kraxven issued a command he never thought he'd give. We make our stand at the Remora Nebula. Prepare all weapons. If the humans wanted war, then war is what they would get. Because the Dominion did not surrender. But deep down, Kraxven knew the truth. This was not a battle. This was a hunt. And the humans? They were just getting started. The Remora Nebula was a graveyard of war. A swirling maelstrom of gas and wreckage, where long-forgotten battles had left shattered fleets drifting in silence. This was where High Warlord Kraxven made his final stand. His fleet, once the pride of the Zorkai Dominion, was battered, retreating, broken. But he still had hope. The nebula's ion storms would disrupt Terran targeting systems. The debris fields would act as natural defenses. The Zorkai warriors, still numbering in the millions, would fight to the last. Yes, here they would hold the line. Here they would finally turn the tide. But there was one problem. The humans weren't stopping. They weren't hesitating. They were diving straight in. And they were smiling. The sound of fear. They followed us into the nebula. The bridge of wrath of Krax was a cacophony of alarms and panic. Tactical officers barked orders, trying to pinpoint the human fleet through the nebula's distortions. But no matter what sensors they used, one terrifying truth remained. We can't track them. And worse, they can track us. Because while the Zorkai fleet flailed in the dark, the humans were patient. They let the Dominion ships move first. They let them expose themselves. And then, they struck. The Deathworlder tactics begin. The first attack came without warning. A Zorkai battleship, its shields already weakened, detonated in an instant. Not from weapons fire. From inside. Terran commandos had already infiltrated the ship. Before the crew even realized their engines had been sabotaged, their reactors overloaded. And just like that, one of Kraxven's strongest warships was gone. But that was only the beginning. Boarding parties reported on multiple vessels. They're inside our ships before we can even see them. How? The nebula should make that impossible. But that was the thing about Deathworlders. The harsher the conditions, the better they fought. While the Zorkai relied on their sensors, the humans relied on instinct. And instinct didn't fail. The horror unfolds. Aboard the Dominion warship Bloodfang, the crew fought desperately as human operatives moved through their corridors like ghosts. Security footage captured blurry figures in advanced combat armor, moving with terrifying efficiency. Zorkai guards fell without a sound. Critical systems shut down. By the time the bridge realized what was happening, the ship was already lost. All hands abandoned. Boom. A series of controlled explosions ripped through Bloodfang's hull, leaving nothing but a burning hulk drifting in the nebula. And the rest of the Zorkai fleet watched in horror. Because the humans weren't just attacking. They were dismantling them. Kraxven's realization. The High Warlord watched helplessly as his fleet was torn apart from within. He gripped the edge of his command console, his claws trembling. These are not soldiers, he whispered. They are something else. And then the final message arrived. A direct broadcast from the Terran flagship. The same human soldier from before, the one who had mocked them during their retreat, appeared on screen. This time he wasn't smiling. This time his eyes were cold. And he spoke 7 words. We gave you a chance to leave. The final stand. Kraxven roared in fury. Enough. We are Zorkai. We do not run. We fight. And so, the remaining Dominion warships turned their guns on the incoming Terran fleet. Massive plasma cannons roared, lighting up the nebula like a dying sun. But the humans had already anticipated it. They didn't fight head-on. They flanked. They dove into the densest pockets of the nebula, moving in perfect formation. Their ships danced between debris and ion storms, weaving through fire and chaos. And one by one the Zorkai weapons fell silent. We can't get a target lock. They're moving too fast. Kraxven watched in disbelief. His fleet was the strongest the Dominion had ever assembled. And yet, they were helpless. Utterly helpless. The wrath of humanity. The Terran ships closed in. The final battle lasted only minutes. By the time it was over, the Zorkai fleet was in ruins. Wreckage drifted, burning and broken. The nebula was silent once more. And at the center of it all, the flagship Wrath of Krax remained, its engines disabled, its crew staring in mute horror. Aboard the bridge, Kraxven collapsed into his command chair. He had fought countless battles. He had conquered entire civilizations. But he had never faced anything like this. Because this wasn't war. This was a lesson. A lesson in why you don't poke Deathworlders. The final transmission. The Terran fleet surrounded the Zorkai flagship, weapons charged and waiting. A single message was sent. Surrender. Kraxven, his body broken, his pride shattered, stared at the transmission. His claws trembled as he reached for the console. He had two choices. Continue the fight and die. Or live and bear the shame of surrender. The entire bridge crew turned to him, waiting. And for the first time in history, a Zorkai warlord lowered his head. He pressed one final button. And the message was sent. We surrender. The war was over. But the lesson? The galaxy would never forget it. Because on that day the Zorkai learned the truth. You don't poke Deathworlders. Because they'll rip your throat out. The war had ended with a message. We surrender. A simple transmission, but its impact rippled across the galaxy. The mighty Zorkai Dominion, conquerors of 100 worlds, the terror of the galactic frontiers, had fallen to humanity. Not just defeated. Humbled. But this wasn't the end of their punishment. No. This was only the beginning. Because humanity never forgets. And they sure as hell don't forgive. The aftermath of a humiliation. The surviving Zorkai warships drifted in the ruins of the Remora Nebula, their hulls scorched, their engines dead. The once mighty Wrath of Krax, flagship of the Dominion, sat in the void like a broken monument to failure. Its crew awaited their fate in stunned silence. On the bridge, Warlord Kraxven stood frozen, staring at the transmission he had just sent. We surrender. His clawed hands trembled. His mandibles twitched. His entire body screamed at him, urging him to retract the message, to order his warriors to die fighting. But he couldn't. Because they weren't warriors anymore. They were prey. The humans respond. The Terran fleet didn't immediately respond. For several minutes, the Zorkai were left in agonizing silence. Waiting. Then, a final transmission arrived. A simple message from the Terran fleet commander. It was not a formal document. It was not a declaration of peace. It was not a treaty. It was a single line. A lesson carved in steel. Never again. And then, the purge began. The price of poking Deathworlders. The humans did not destroy the Zorkai fleet. They did something far worse. They crippled it. All Zorkai warships were boarded. All weapons systems were seized or sabotaged. All command logs were downloaded, exposing their past war crimes to the galaxy. And then, one by one, the humans left them adrift. Helpless. Powerless. Their ships would be allowed to return home, but they would arrive defenseless. And the galaxy would see them for what they had become. Not conquerors. Not warriors. But failures. The return to the homeworld. When the crippled Zorkai fleet limped back into Dominion space, their own people refused to acknowledge them. The once great warlord Kraxven, who had commanded respect through fear, was now met with only disgust. He had done the unthinkable. He had surrendered. And the Zorkai did not tolerate weakness. As soon as his warship docked, a tribunal was assembled. A trial held before the greatest warlords of the Dominion. Kraxven stood alone, his once ornate battle armor stripped of its honors. The judgment was swift. You are no longer Warlord Kraxven. You are no longer fit to command. You are no longer Zorkai. Exiled. Cast out from his own people. No home. No fleet. No name. Nothing. And as he walked out of the tribunal chamber, humiliated and alone, one final message arrived. From humanity. His personal communicator beeped. A transmission, sent directly to him. With shaking claws he opened it. And his blood ran cold. It was a recording, taken from the battlefield. It showed Zorkai warriors retreating in terror. It showed human soldiers laughing as they advanced. And at the end, the same Terran soldier from before appeared. He leaned toward the camera, his grin wolfish. I told you. You're not the hunters anymore. The transmission cut out. And Kraxven finally understood. This war wasn't about land. It wasn't about resources. It wasn't even about revenge. This was a warning. A lesson burned into history. And every species in the galaxy would remember it. Because the humans had proven what no one wanted to believe. You don't poke Deathworlders. And if you do, you pray they show mercy. The end.